Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan, and today I'm going to tell you if this Game Pass games with your time and bandwidth. Today's game is Trek to Yomi. Evoking the style of acclaimed Japanese director Kurasawa, is the samurai story in Trek to Yomi worth embarking on? Trek to Yomi is an Xbox and PC cross-release. It's also available to buy on the PS4. It does feature cross-save on Game Pass, and is Series S and X upgrade for some better frame rates, and the entire game will last you only around 3 to 4 hours. So what exactly is Trek to Yomi? Well, it's a 2D action platformer that's more closely related to a walking simulator style of game such as The Artful Escape than a complex action game such as Salt and Sanctuary. You play as Hiroki, samurai protector of a small village. When a warlord and his throng of bandits threatens you and your neighboring villages, you must embark on a quest to protect the innocent and put evil to the sword. Of course, nothing goes as smoothly as you'd think, with the second half delving into the more surreal parts of Japanese folklore. The game's primary loop is very simple. Move from area to area and dispatch of the various enemies along the way. Combat is fast and brutal, with enemies usually only taking 2 or 3 hits and you only surviving around the same. You have an assortment of light and heavy attacks, though your primary method of executions will probably end up being the parry system, as it allows for safe counterattacks should you have good timing. As you progress, you gain more combat abilities, and the enemies in turn gain strength. Armored enemies require you to stun them and perform an execution in order to kill, and ranged enemies mean you'll have to skillfully dodge. You will also get a small assortment of ranged weapons of your own along the way. Of course, the real draw of the game is its fantastic art style, evoking landmark Kurasawa films such as The Hidden Fortress and Seven Samurai from back in the 70s, with the gray and grainy black and white aesthetic and cinematic camera angles. Areas are usually static screens, much like older Resident Evil games, which allows for some breathtakingly cinematic fight locations. So all in all, Trek to Yomi is a linear 2D action game with a heavy emphasis on story and aesthetic, more so than complex mechanics. So what do I like about Trek to Yomi? Well, I absolutely adore the way this game looks, with its combination of grainy black and white with its gorgeously detailed and fantastically cinematic angles, makes every new screen a delight. Additionally, the art direction and location for combat are straight out of classic Japanese samurai movies, with the creators of the game clearly well versed in what makes those movies so visually enticing and able to replicate it well here. And lastly, I found the voice acting to be phenomenal, with it being entirely in Japanese, but the range of emotions across the multitude of characters coming through, even if my Japanese is extremely poor. When it comes to the bad, the combat is unfortunately very clunky, which is really disappointing for a samurai game. Parrying doesn't have a super clear indication of success, and the game outright ignored some of my button presses for certain combo strings, even when I had the stamina to pull them off. Eventually, you get frustrated and basically just parry your way through the whole game, which, while the best viable strategy, is boring. Piggybacking off the poor combat, there's way too much combat overall. I never thought I'd argue for a game to have more walking and less quote-unquote gameplay, but with the combat being so repetitive, the fact that it comes up so often only exacerbates the issue of game progression feeling sluggish. Parts of this game felt like an absolute slog. And lastly, the story itself isn't particularly interesting, which I'm willing to cut a little bit of slack, as the basic hero's journey was good enough for Kurasawa, so it's probably good enough for this, but overall the pacing and how scenes are structured is a bit off. As you know, I rate games here on a 3-point scale. Must play, maybe consider, don't bother. I think this game is maybe consider. Trek to Yomi is a game I really wanted to love more than I did, but I still came away from it fairly satisfied. It's a beautiful looking game. If you have any love of the 60s or 70s Japanese samurai movies, you are absolutely in for a treat, but it is bogged down by its overabundance of frustrating combat. It's a great Game Pass game, as you can beat it in a few hours, have a good time, and put it away, but if you're looking to purchase it, maybe wait for a sale or for it to inevitably show up in one of those humble bundles. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and to go out there and enjoy Trek to Yomi.